Am I the a-hole for refusing to take care of my deadbeat father's affair family after he's gone? My deadbeat father walked out on me, my mom, and my sister when I, 21 male, was 5 years old. He had an affair with another woman and decided he wanted to be with her. He had nothing to do with us. Didn't even come to my sister's funeral 2 years later and never visited her in the hospital. He never paid for anything. He fought child support like crazy. When it became clear he wasn't going to help at all or pay anything, his parents, who initially wanted my mom to stay open to taking him back, stepped up and provided for us when we needed it. They also decided that I would be the one to inherit their estate when they passed. They set this up when I was 10 years old, ensuring my father wouldn't get anything, and neither would the children he had with his affair partner. I've always known about my father's other kids, but I have never considered them siblings. My sister, who passed away when we were young, will forever be my only real sibling. I grew up having zero contact with my father or his affair family. Last year, my father reached out because he was diagnosed with cancer and wanted to reconcile. I refused to respond, but he went to my grandparents. They told him I wanted nothing to do with him, even on his deathbed. They hadn't had a relationship with him for over a decade, but when they heard about his illness, part of them hoped he would back off me. This brings us to the reason for my post. My father recently learned about the inheritance arrangement, and that my grandparents have set things up so that neither he nor his affair family can contest the will. He now knows he and his other kids will get nothing from the estate, even if he were still alive. He began reaching out to me, begging me to make sure his affair family is okay after he dies. He admitted he and his affair partner made bad choices in the past, but said he wants to ensure the kids are taken care of. At first, I ignored him, but he kept pestering me. I eventually replied, telling him that I want nothing to do with his affair family and will never help them. He became hysterical, sending texts and DMs about how his family is innocent and that I should try to know them and help them if they ever need it. Am I the a-hole? Now for the top comments. I'll provide them the same care you gave to your firstborn daughter as she died in hospital. The same involvement you had with her funeral will be shared back to your new family from me. Send, block, and forget he ever existed at all. Not the a-hole. Funny how his family are innocent, yet he walked out on 3 innocent people. And when his daughter, a child, was dying, he didn't give a crap. He also didn't pay child support for his innocent children because it was his duty as a father. Now he's trying to fight for his affair children to be provided for? His hypocrisy is off the charts. He made his choices, and now he expects you to clean up his mess? It's wild how he can suddenly care about family when it benefits him. Total not the a-hole. Not the a-hole. Just think, if he didn't get sick, you still wouldn't have heard from him. You are only good enough to talk to because he wants something. Tell him you will show him the same love and care on his deathbed that he showed your poor sister. Block him and anyone else who tries to hassle you. Oh, I'm sure I would have heard from him after my grandparents died, but they are both still healthy and doing good, so it would have taken forever for him to reach out if he hadn't gotten sick. 100% you would have heard from him then. Selfish people like him only care about what benefits themselves. I'm glad you have grandparents that are there for you. Not the a-hole. He spent your whole life ignoring you and now expects you to clean up his mistakes? You owe him nothing, and it's not your responsibility to fix the consequences of his actions. The fact that he abandoned you and your sister speaks volumes. It's baffling he thinks that after all his time, you owe him or his family anything. Next story. Am I the a-hole for telling my sister-in-law and her husband that foster care is better than being taken in by family who don't want you? I, 27 male, spent most of my childhood in foster care, but I also had a slightly more unique experience of having family who, after I was removed from my parents, did take me in. However, they were family members who did not want me, and the year I lived with them was one of the worst of my life, by far worse than the 11 years I spent in foster care. Grudges held against one of my parents meant there was no love, affection, or kindness for me. I'm still not sure why they took me in, but it only lasted a year. Then they told the caseworker they couldn't keep doing it, and I fully entered the system. I never got adopted and had some really crappy foster families, but all of that was still better than the year I lived with those relatives. If I had to explain why, I'd say it's largely due to how damaging it can be for biological relatives to show so much resentment and disdain for you. Growing up, I used to hear all the time how families should stand by each other and how family love was a sure thing. So being a kid and not being loved by family can make you feel so much more unlovable. I know I used to wonder what was wrong with me. Even though young me was told about the issues between my relatives and my parent, it didn't stop me from blaming myself. That year of my life took over a decade to heal from, and therapy after I left the system was the biggest asset in helping me recover. I explained all this because I need to provide context for why I said what I did. My wife's sister and her husband were approached to take in the husband's 2 very young half-siblings. He has never met them and has no interest in a relationship. There is no other biological family to ask, just him. His interest in or care for them is 0. But they worried about looking bad by saying no when the kid's other option is foster care. He knows the kids are innocent of the issues he had with his biological mother. They wondered if they should take them in anyway and knew I had some experience. I told them that foster care is far better than being taken in by a family who don't want you. I explained that it is so much more damaging if they get taken in by a bio family who can't treat them with even the most basic care. How it can be extra harmful. Unless they are willing to work on wanting the kids and forming a relationship, the kids would be better off trying to find a foster family. I told them taking them in without forming a relationship would be awful for the kids. A friend of theirs was around when we were talking, and she berated me for the comments I made. She said foster care is the worst place for a kid to be, and that indifferent bio relatives are better than all the abuse that happens in foster care. I argued that foster care can be better, and it sure was in my experience, even at its worst. She claimed I was biased and not thinking about the reality of being in foster care. Am I the a-hole? Not the a-hole. There is never a one-size-fits-all answer to anything. Life is a roll of the dice. Sometimes you crap out and sometimes you don't. It was perfectly fine for you to speak about your own experiences. Exactly. Not every family situation is a fairy tale. Sometimes foster care can genuinely be a better option, and it's brave to share that perspective. Not the a-hole. But what's wrong with her? Is she ever being adopted? She lived in foster care before? Cut out the fantasy land about loving bio family. Real life is worst when being with family that didn't want you. OP, don't argue with Karen. Don't lower yourself to their level. My grandmother and her brother were forever affected by their parents' divorce. It was during the Depression, and they were shuffled around to different relatives who already had large families. My grandmother said years later that she never let them see how hungry she was, or how it bothered her that they so openly resented her and her brother as being burdens. Not the a-hole. You were asked for your opinion based off your personal lived experience. You gave it. The friend needs to stay in her lane. Exactly. They asked, she answered. Friend should have stayed out of it. Next story. Am I the a-hole for grounding my daughter and canceling her senior trip after I found out she was cheating on her boyfriend? I have 2 daughters, Lizzie, 17 female, and Mackenzie, 14 female. Their dad and I divorced a few years ago after I discovered he was having an affair. I have the kids most of the time, and their dad has them every weekend and during the summers. Lizzie has been dating Jacob, 18 male, for over a year now. Jacob is constantly at our house. He's a sweet, good young man, and I believe he'll be the valedictorian of their class. However, a few weeks ago, I overheard Lizzie on the phone with a guy, clearly flirting. At first, I thought it was Jacob, but then I heard her say Brandon. I realized she was talking to someone else. Then, a week later, she mentioned to me that she was heading out to hang with a friend, and when I looked out the window, I saw her get into a car and greet a guy with a kiss. It wasn't Jacob. Even after that, Jacob continued to come over, hanging out with Lizzie. He and Lizzie still acted like a couple, holding hands, laughing, and spending time together, just like they always had. I felt disgusted knowing my daughter was being a two-timer. After Jacob left that day, I confronted my daughter. I asked her point blank, "Are you cheating on your boyfriend with another guy?" She said it was none of my business and that her personal life was hers only. I told her she was wrong and that I raised her better than to treat people like this. She told me she was bored with Jacob and that Brandon was more her type now. I told her that if she wasn't happy, she should just break up with Jacob. She said she didn't know if she wanted to be with Brandon or if she was just having fun flirting and teasing. I told her cheating was unacceptable and wrong, and as a consequence, I grounded her. I also told her she wasn't allowed to go on her senior trip with her friends. She obviously did not take that too well and has been at her dad's place for the last couple of days. My ex-husband called me, saying I was being unreasonable by not letting her go on the trip and that her relationship with Jacob was just a high school thing. He then told me I needed to put my bitterness aside and stop punishing his daughter. I told him I was teaching our daughter right from wrong and that actions have consequences. Is your daughter aware of the reason for the divorce? Yes. Not the a-hole. Your post sounds like Lizzie's daddy's girl, and he's been green-lighting her behavior. He's definitely the fun parent. Dad gives them money and takes them on trips while I do the actual parenting. My youngest needed a physical exam for soccer tryouts, and he couldn't even be bothered to do that. Maybe it's time for Dad to take Lizzie most of the time, and you enjoy her presence during the weekend and summers. I'd hate for her to influence the youngest to behave in such unscrupulous ways. Good luck, Opie. You're a great mom. Maybe even consider telling Jacob or his parent about Lizzie's actions. When I got cheated on, I wish someone had told me sooner. She will probably learn to be better at cheating. What you're doing is not wrong, but I don't think it will work. Everyone keeps acting like it's all or nothing. Opie's daughter is gonna get caught and will have to face serious consequences. What Opie has done is guarantee her teen won't come to her for help. Talk to the kid and even express your disappointment, but this punishment is so over the top. Opie made her teen the victim, and that's how the teen will see it. I agree, and think something more appropriate to the situation that isn't a punishment would be to say that the boyfriend can't come to the house anymore if she's cheating, because Opie won't participate personally in duping him. That means Opie isn't confronted with a personally upsetting situation, and thus also creates a good motivation for daughter to make a better choice as she can't keep everything the same. Last story. Am I the a-hole for telling my cheating wife that I deserve a vacation with my girl best friend? My wife and I have been married for more than 2 decades now. We have 2 children who are both in college. A couple of years ago, my wife admitted to cheating on me in a one-night stand. She said it was the worst mistake of her life and that she deeply regretted it. At the time, our marriage was going through a lot of difficulties, and we were even seriously considering divorce. However, I never expected my wife to betray me like that. My wife showed a lot of remorse and was willing to do anything for reconciliation. While I almost filed for divorce, I decided not to and chose to give our family a chance. To be honest, it was the best decision I've ever made in my life. Strangely enough, that incident which pushed our marriage to the brink also repaired it. While I occasionally still have days where I feel heartbroken and betrayed, those days are infrequent because my wife has done everything possible to show how much she loves me and our family. I have also been friends with Vanessa since we were in kindergarten. Vanessa used to spend a lot of time at my house, and she pretty much became my adopted sister. Vanessa and I were really close and never lost our friendship, despite all the life changes we went through. Vanessa was the best woman at my wedding, and I was the man of honor at hers. Initially, my wife was insecure about our friendship because she thought from her woman's intuition that Vanessa had feelings for me. However, after getting to know Vanessa, she realized that Vanessa was just a really close friend. During the time my wife cheated on me, I confided in Vanessa, and she recommended that I take 3 weeks to take a breather after making my decision. That turned out to be a great suggestion and ultimately saved my marriage. I told my wife about it, and she was really grateful to Vanessa as well. Fast forward to today, both my kids are in college. Last month, Vanessa reached out to me and asked if we could take a week-long trip to our hometown to visit our favorite childhood places. It would be a road trip where we would drive through the city, visit our high school, favorite parks, restaurants, etc. To be honest, the suggestion really excited me because I've been feeling a bit empty since my kids left for college. I told my wife about it and I expected some pushback. My wife understandably was shocked and said this seemed like a romantic trip I was taking with my girl best friend. She was worried something might happen, especially because Vanessa is divorced. I told my wife there was nothing romantic about this trip. It's just a trip two friends are taking down memory lane. I also told my wife I wouldn't have even considered this trip if she hadn't cheated on me 2 years ago. But now, she needed to allow it. I explained that I needed a mental health break and that I still occasionally feel betrayed because of what happened 2 years ago. After many discussions, my wife ultimately agreed to it, and I was really happy about it. Was I the a-hole? Telling me about revenge without actually telling me. Exactly. OP guy here. You taking this trip is as selfish as your wife's one-night stand. Perhaps even more so, since it's definitely premeditated and of a much longer duration. Oh, and let me guess, 1 room? No offense, OP. You're a moronic a-hole. You're destroying what purportedly had been improvement in your marriage. Resentment will rule the day. Plus, it is 2 years after the fact. How does this trip have anything to do with it? Did his best friend say, hey, in 2 years let's take a trip as a way of getting past your wife cheating? I have a feeling he uses the you cheated card a lot. I could divorce my wife, or I can use this as leverage to treat her like crap for the rest of her life. My husband did a lot of messed up stuff early on in our relationship. We've learned, grown, and are in an amazing place now. Sure, from time to time memories come up and it stings. There's a tiny part of me that is holding on to the resentment, and I'm truly working on letting it go. It gets lighter and lighter each day. I can understand that feeling of, well, you did that, so I should be able to do this, but that will lead to nowhere but distance and disconnect in our now near-perfect relationship. I will not do anything to jeopardize what we have. There is no use for a tit-for-tat in a healthy relationship. Your wife messed up. That is a divorceable offense, and you would have been in the right. I would have been fully within my right to leave my husband. But the fact of the matter is, we decided to stay and we forgave and continue to forgive our spouses. Forgiveness is ongoing. You stated your wife has changed and your relationship is better for it. If you go on this trip, you will bring destabilization in your marriage. There's no universe where I'd go on a trip alone with a man who isn't my husband. I don't care what is done in the past. I wouldn't expect him to be okay with it. If you're having second thoughts or feel this marriage isn't for you, or that you can't forgive her completely, that's okay. It will hurt her, but sometimes the pain is so deep that it just lingers. But don't expect to stay in a healthy marriage if you keep holding the past over her head for you to do things your wife is not comfortable with. It's a bit sus that your divorced female friend is asking you to go on a trip alone together to reminisce about old times. Something does not add up here. Does she not care about how this may impact your marriage? As a woman, that just feels very odd. My best friend is a married man. There's no world where I'd go on a trip with him without inviting her. That's weird.